How do we conquer our fear of the unknown? We've discussed a number of horror films on our show thus far, and at the end of the day, almost all of their scariest elements come down to fear of the unknown. Cannibal families, demonic cults, seeing dead people. They're all really bizarre and frightening because of it. But sometimes, even things closer to home can be just as elusive. Say, something we share our oceans with, maybe? Steven Spielberg understood this when he ignited his career with Jaws, one of cinema's first ever blockbusters. But there's more to it than just fear. In fact, according to today's guest, it's more so a movie about facing your fear. Taylor D. Adams is a fellow storyteller and podcaster based in Raleigh, North Carolina. He's produced over 200 episodes of television, in part through his production company, Scrapped Productions, and has had his work featured through NBC, ESPN, PBS, and more. He is the host of the Film Nuts podcast, where he talks to artists of all backgrounds and concentrations about their favorite movies and television shows. Today, however, the turns have tabled, and now he will be talking about his favorite movie, Jaws. In the aftermath of another successful Shark Week, Taylor is here to talk to us all about how Jaws taught him and can help teach us the key to conquering our fear of the unknown. Hello and welcome to My Favorite Movie Is, a podcast sharing the stories behind how an all-time favorite movie earns that title. I'm your host, Larry Freed. I'm a filmmaker, writer, and podcaster, and every week I sit down with a fellow cinephile who, through their one-of-a-kind insights, will help us rethink one of the greatest movies of all time. Thank you so much for being here. I'm sure you listen to plenty of film podcasts, and I am honored that this show is amongst them. Before we go any further, just know that if you haven't seen the movie we're talking about today, don't worry. You can keep listening for now. We will eventually have to dive into the nitty-gritty, but we'll be sure to give you a proper warning before we dive deep into spoiler territory. But for those of you who did the homework, sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of My Favorite Movie Is.
Hi, my name is Taylor D. Adams, and my favorite movie is Jaws. I remember movies filmed as early as 4 years old. I don't remember like the first movie I saw, but some of my earliest memories of film were split between the types of movies that my mom, my stepdad, and myself would see, and types of movies that my dad and myself would see. I lived with my mom and my stepdad for most of the time, and then probably every other weekend I saw my dad. They were all good movies. They were just different tastes. So like with my dad, at 4 years old, I saw True Lies and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
My dad and I would always probably go see more raunchy stuff just because my dad was a little less protective of my innocence or whatever. So we'd go see movies like Snatch when I was 12. Like a Guy Ritchie film, or we'd go, you know, or I'm like 10 years old and we go see like Dude, Where's My Car? So like it's not quite
incredible,
age appropriate, but it's there. And then with my mom and my stepdad, like they had E.T. on VHS, and so we would watch that. And I remember the first time watching that, I was 4 years old, and I was crying my eyes out at the end because I was so sad that, spoilers, E.T. went home. I was just so upset. That's the earliest memory I have of being like emotionally moved by a movie, which coincidentally was another Steven Spielberg movie.
Yeah, look at that, huh?
That was good for me to get a sense of what kinds of movies exist and what are my favorites. And I have favorites in both camps. And I think that's really important to kind of have this. It was an unintentional, well-rounded film viewing childhood.
Would you say Jaws was more of a dad film than a mom film?
It was actually probably more of my stepdad film, because
the coveted third piece of the Triforce.
He's a big fan of watching movies that just happen to be on TV. And Jaws just happened to be on a lot of the time. Specifically TNT. I felt like at 2 p.m. every day, Jaws was on. I didn't watch it every time it came on, but it was just kind of always in existence. I can't remember what made me want to sit down and watch it. Everybody I knew that was older than me had seen it and liked it. And so I just thought I should watch it because it's a thing that grown-ups like. This was an example of like a movie. This was like a big deal, like a big blockbuster. It's just got this power to it that's really impressive. And it's the earliest this was the movie that I saw that I was like, at that point in time, I was like, oh, movies now. Like, we're making movies. And granted, there's a bunch of stuff that, there's 3/4 of a century that has passed since the early dawning of film. But for some reason, everything about this movie clicked as this is what a movie should be. It should be fun. It should have meaning. There should be some mystery behind it as well. There should be good relationships within it, and you should have a couple iconic quotes in there as well, like just something super memorable. And so that's what kind of drew me to it. And then I became almost obsessed with sharks and sea life in general. My family and I would watch Shark Week whenever it was on. My stepdad, my mom, and I used to go fishing a lot too. And so, we didn't catch a great white or anything like that, but I was maybe like 8 and I caught like a 4-foot long sandbar shark, and I thought it was really cool. I'm a big fan of Ocean Conservancy. I donate to the Ocean Conservancy like once a year, and I watch a lot of documentaries, and I'm very aware of my carbon footprint. If you dove deep into kind of this like appreciation of more of nature than anything, I think. And I maybe one day wanted to create something like that or whatever. I'm not sure. I don't know if it subconsciously instilled in me the desire to like make stuff. The earliest example I can think of making something that was on film or tape or whatever was with my older cousin. And him and his family had a VHS camera. And he built like kind of this, I can't remember exactly what it was made of. It might have been made of Lego. It's just like a Lego city. And for some reason, they also in their house had a child's Godzilla costume. And so they put me in the child's Godzilla costume and filmed me just like rampaging on this Lego city.
Amazing.
And I remember this one moment. He like wrote the credits down on a sheet of paper and was filming them and reading them. And my 6-year-old self is in the background, like laughing because I'm having so much fun. So that was probably my first like introduction to like making something, even though at the time I wasn't like cinema, I wasn't like making things. I got a camera when I was about 13. My dad gave me a camera. He got it for me, because he knew I was into movies and we bonded a lot over movies. And so he's like, this is like the default thing to do. And I had been wanting a camera for a long time, and coincided with us going up to Alaska because my dad at the time was a marathon runner, and he was running a marathon up in Anchorage. And so I went with him and I recorded like the whole time. I just thought it was like really cool to just record stuff. We do some sightseeing, I film him finishing the race. There's also this like really dramatic subplot of our trip that one of my dad's best friends in high school, he moved to Alaska and he eventually passed away at kind of an early age. And my dad never get to like say goodbye or anything, related to closure. So there was this B subplot of like my dad tracking down where his friend was buried and then going to see him. And so I don't know at the time if that impacted me enough to be like, oh, look at the emotion I can capture. I don't think I was thinking of it like that, but there was probably something subconscious about like, look at all the different things that can be captured on mini DV, which was the format of the camera.
Amazing. Yeah. And you never ended up editing any of that footage. Is that correct?
No, I didn't know what editing was. Like, we just captured it. It was like 6 hours of the thing, man. I don't even know where those tapes are. I think my dad might still have them, but yeah.
Somewhere you have to unearth that. That's going to be the next great Sundance indie doc.
I don't even know if those tapes are still in working condition. That's the thing.
They might not be. Aren't there also some tapes that like after a certain number of years, they like crumble, like they can't really even be touched?
I'm sure. I mean, I know film is super fragile, but I'm sure tapes are not far behind as far as degradation.
I assume you made a lot of projects with your friends and things like that. Were there any highlights, any fun things you guys made?
Yeah, we let's see. Me and my neighbor Sam used to just like run around the woods Blair Witch style with the camera and just recording whatever. I still have some of the videos on my hard drive somewhere. we had a really nice snow, and we went down to the hill and just like recorded ourselves sledding down the snow. But we would like, early Jackass days, I guess, we'd like try to build a snow ramp, but it wasn't quite good enough. So we just run head on. We would sled head on into the snow pile.
Goodness.
That also became my medium of choice for free-for-all projects in school. So, and sometimes it was for fun and sometimes it was for a project in school. So instead of like my final paper for AP English, I made like a video.
Nice.
And my friends and I did a spoof of Sports Center with puppets,
Nice.
stuff like that. And then I had in Latin class, me and my buddy, for a final project, we wrote and directed I don't know if you want to call it a short film, because I would say it's just a stupid video, but it's like things we have learned in Latin class and like ancient Roman history incorporated into a little digital short. Yeah, just stuff like that. Just kind of like opportunities that I saw in order to, would I rather write a paper or would I rather make a video? And I'd rather make a video.
Yeah, I made videos too all the time. There is such an important transition from stupid video to short film that every filmmaker needs to make at some point, and you never quite know when it happens until after the fact.
I didn't even know that I wanted to like be a filmmaker. Like I that wasn't ever in my like conscious. Like I wasn't exposed to enough of the art behind making movies that's what I wanted to do. Like I just enjoyed the medium that I was working in and what could I do with that. I ended up going to NC State University down here in Raleigh. And then down here, that's when I discovered more of the art behind film, my sophomore year of college, when I started actually taking arts application film courses. And then that opened up a whole new world to me as far as meaning and technique and watching stuff that you don't necessarily like but you appreciate about, that you can learn from, and then stuff that you saw and you're like, oh my god, I haven't seen this movie before, this is so cool, like that kind of thing.
Do you have any formative films from that period that were like you watched them either for the first time or for the first time with those eyes and it totally just changed your perspective?
The first one that comes to mind is actually Blues Brothers.
Nice.
So I had seen Blues Brothers in high school, and then when in my intro to film class, one of our midterm or something was write a paper analyzing a scene, and they showed movies that you could choose from. And I happened to own Blues Brothers, and that was on there. And I was like, yeah, I'll just do this. And then I just picked a scene. I ended up writing something about the church scene in Blues Brothers. And I noticed as I was like basically listing down all the things that I was noticing, I'm like, this is really cool to just analyze something that I've just been watching for fun. And that was my first introduction to like just paying more attention to the things that go into making a film or a movie. Outside of like that stuff for school, the movies that started coming out around that time were movies that I just, with this knowledge already, I started appreciating and paying more attention to. Like when Little Miss Sunshine came out, I thought it was like such a sweet movie, and I was like really into that was probably an early introduction to like indie art cinema, kind of. So like movies like that were just more on my radar. And then also the people that I was meeting were into other movies that I had never heard before, and so we started watching like Donnie Darko and Sin City, and I had never heard of or seen these movies before, and so I started like watching them with them, and then we'd all buy tickets to go see Snakes on a Plane and stuff like that. So
again, that balance, man.
Yeah, got to get a balance. Yeah.
Was Jaws a movie that you rediscovered during this period?
Yes, it was. I had it, and I would watch it from time to time, and just really appreciate more of what went into it, like looking at theme a little bit better and looking how, a dolly zoom actually works, that iconic dolly zoom from Jaws, and noticing things like you hear the iconic score before you even see any kind of visual on screen other than text. Just noticing these little details. I was really into it. And then I started, I don't know how, but I started discovering more of behind the scenes kind of stuff about the movie, like the mechanical shark's name was Bruce, like stuff like that was super interesting to me to find out. Just the fact that there's all these layers that go into making a film, and my whole life and has inspired me in a bunch of different ways, either to do things or think differently about things.
And here it comes. We are officially entering spoiler territory. For those of you who want to go into this film as fresh as possible, this is where we part. If you've been enjoying the show so far and you want more My Favorite Movie Is, I encourage you to check out more episodes on our show page on the podcasting app you're listening on right now, or find all of our episodes at mfmipodcast.com. We've covered plenty of other movies, and any movie lover worth their salt has surely seen at least one of them. But all right, enough dilly-dallying. Let's dive into spoiler territory.
What is it?
To Hooper, that's the USS Indianapolis.
You were on the Indianapolis?
What happened? Japanese submarine slammed 2 torpedoes into our side chief. He was coming back from the island of Tinian to Lady and just delivered the bomb, the Hiroshima bomb.
A scene that I've become more appreciative of as time has gone on is the USS Indianapolis scene. Because when you're a kid, that's the boring part. It's adults sitting around talking and showing off scars while they're drunk. Like, as a kid, whatever, show me shark, like, you know. But the more, you know, the older I get and the more knowledgeable I become about certain things, that scene really sticks out to me again. And also the fact that I like know the story of the USS Indianapolis pretty well, hearing, you know, a fictional firsthand account of it is so impactful.
You know the thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eye.
Quint is, like, I would say relatively one-dimensional in this sense. He just wants to kill a shark. And it's because sharks killed all his friends. And so that scene has a lot more impact for me because I am noticing how it plays out more. I'm paying more attention to it because I have a more of an appreciation. It makes me feel more compassion for the character. And then in relation, I mean, I already try to think I feel like this, but in that sense, maybe it hopefully affects the viewer into having compassion for people outside of the movie that you're watching. Because you don't know what they have gone through. Like, Quint is this grizzled old stereotypical sea captain in some way, but then you find out this story and you understand him a little bit more. And I think for me, I just feel sad for the character and I understand him more. But as far as like how it personally affects me, I just think it instills in me something that I hope is already there about learning to listen to why people do what they do.
Do you feel that way about other characters in the film?
I feel like with Hooper, I kind of always understand Hooper. I mean, from the first time he gets there, this is his mission. Like, I'm going to figure this out and we're going to solve this problem. And it's just problem oriented. And then Chief Brody is kind of cool because you like learn a little bit more as the first half of the film goes on, like the layers of the onion get peeled back a little bit more about why he is what he is. You know, there's that great line about his fear of water, and is there a technical term for it?
I guess it's a childhood thing. There's a clinical name for it, isn't there?
Drowning.
I love that.
I know.
Scene.
I laugh so hard.
It's an iconic moment.
I pay more attention to how much I learn about him within the first half of the movie, like learning that he didn't want to be in New York City anymore because he felt like he couldn't make a difference. So he moved to a small town, but it happens to be an island that is surrounded by water, and he doesn't like water. But when you're on the island, you don't know it's an island. Like, he says something along those lines.
Doesn't make much sense for a guy who hates the water to live on an island either.
It's only an island if you look at it from the water.
That makes a lot of sense.
There's always something new to see. Even if you can quote the movie line by line. On the personal side of things, I mentioned it earlier, just my curiosity and appreciation for nature. If I want to be specific about aquatic life, I can. But I think just in general, even though the shark is the villain in the movie, he is the monster that needs to be taken down. Like, there's a level of understanding that needs to go into it. And like I said, with Hooper, like he knows how these sharks work, or at least has the theories of how these sharks work, because they're constantly figuring out what they do. So just that kind of curiosity to like learn more about this thing that we're so scared of, because if we learn more about it, then hopefully that takes away the fear of something. And so I think that's what it's been like on a personal level, is the things that scare me, I should find out more about. I know there are certain things that we're not supposed to understand, but I think that's what it is for me. Is this was the first film where I identified this mean thing, this evil thing, this monster that is a thing that actually occurs in nature. There's stories all over the news every summer about shark attacks, and fear gets stricken everywhere. And so to learn more about what is actually going on, it's helpful. It adds a sense of control, which I think everybody wants at some point in their life, even if they feel like they can't control a lot of things. If they can control what they learn about something, then that might affect it. And that whole talk leads into kind of how it's influenced me professionally, in that you never know what kind of power a film is going to have on something. When Peter Benchley wrote the book and then the movie came out, a couple years later, he said he regretted ever coming up with the story, because he started dedicating a lot of his free time and his resources to shark awareness and ocean conservancy, because it sparked this terror of people just going out. Like literally they had like shark bounty hunters that would just go out and kill sharks. Like life imitates art, imitates life. Like that's,
I was literally about to say that.
It actually happened.
It's pretty
like,
frightening.
Yeah, that was the thing that happened. I'm so glad Jaws exists, but I understand Peter Benchley's regret, because it can have that effect on something. Then you have a movie like Jurassic Park that comes out. Nobody's like afraid of those because dinosaurs don't exist. I mean, the dinosaurs that exist are the chickens that live across the street from me. Like that's the closest thing we have. Like that's literally it.
Weird flex, but okay.
No, it's not. I don't have chickens. I don't have chickens. They have chickens.
Oh, you just casually live next to dinosaurs?
Dumb,
that's
fat,
chill.
delicious dinosaurs. But like, yeah, there's just this. You never know what kind of power a film is going to have over people, and it could be people, capital P people, or just subsets of people. You never know. And just this film has inspired so many things, both positive and negative, for film, for the animal at the center of it, for a lot of things.
And is that something you strive for in your work,
I
both
do.
positive and negative?
I do. Well, hopefully whatever I do has a positive influence on something.
Right. But I mean, look at Jaws, right?
No, it could. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Right out of school, I graduated in 2009. I got a job as a car salesman.
I actually listened to a podcast where you said that.
That was the worst job I've ever had. I worked there for 3 months. But since that job ended, my life and career has had some kind of production-y thing in it. I've been an intern in a post-production house. I ended up being a web intern for NC State Athletics, my alma mater. And that's kind of where I started to get more reps in, I guess, as far as making stuff. So I was an intern there for 2 years. I worked closely with a guy who was producing their TV show at the time. And I got close with him. Because I wanted to work in TV. Like I said, growing up, I watched TV all the time. That's what I wanted to do. I stayed close to him. And then when he left, I was able to take over making their television show. And I did so for 3 years. And I got really burnt out. Like it's really long hours. It's work almost 7 days a week for 8 months straight. It's really much a grind. But when you're 24, like it's not a big deal. I had reached a point where I wanted to take a break. I was burnt out, and I wanted to make stuff that I wanted to make. And so that's when I founded Scrapped. My mission with Scrapped is to make stuff that is important to me. For a lot of my career, I have felt like I've had to make a lot out of nothing, or I put a lot. If I don't have the equipment or the resources, I at least put my all into it and my enthusiasm. And that's where kind of the name Scrapped comes from. Like otherwise, my product might be thrown in the trash. Because it's not maybe up to a more professional standard that might already exist. But that I wasn't going to let that stop me from making stuff I wanted to make. I spent probably a year just making my own digital content. Like we made I think we made 60 videos in 1 year.
Wow.
and just
those are good numbers.
Yeah,
those are good numbers.
And it's all interview based stuff. Like we talk with hip hop artists in their community, shine a light on them, give them some exposure. And some of the people we've interviewed are now like DJs for Apple Music, and they got signed by major record labels. And then we also had a show where I would interview people while we drank beer, do stuff like that. And then my partner, Nicole, I helped her create a small show about the stories of her parents who immigrated from Vietnam. And so we were doing just kind of like stories that I didn't really see, either in subject matter or in style. That led into me going back to NC State with an idea to do a documentary for them, but inspired by my watching of Last Chance U on Netflix. It was a phenomenal show. And so I started making documentaries for NC State Athletics for another 3 years, and then I got burned out again. And this was 2020. The last show I made was when everything shut down, because we were filming a basketball tournament and then they shut it down. You know, I am a freelancer, but I work for myself. I work for my company, Scrapped. And since then, we've just been busy doing a lot of different things. We've been making educational content. We've been making wildlife documentary content, doing a bunch of different stuff. And then some of it's for pay, and then some of it is for fun. And one of the fun things we do is the Film Nuts podcast, which I started 2 or 3 years ago. It's hard to keep track, but we're in our 3rd season right now. So there's that. I was having trouble connecting with people because of lockdown. And I feel like a lot of people started a podcast during lockdown. What makes one special over the other? Whatever.
I don't know what you're talking, Taylor. I don't know what you're talking about. What is this whole? What are you talking about?
So, and it was, I didn't even have like a goal. Like I didn't want to like, oh, this is my new job. Like I just wanted to like talk to people, and the way that I connect best with people is probably by either food or things we watch. And so I had this concept for the Film Nuts podcast where I talk to people about what they love to watch, whether it be movies or whether it be TV. I think it'd be fun later on to do maybe a couple video game themed episodes. But I wanted to hear why certain things were important to certain people and why they liked watching them so much. And it didn't have to be the Citizen Kane. It could be Snakes on a Plane. it could be anything.
That's a great little rhyme right there.
I know. I did it unintentionally until the very last minute.
Amazing.
My basic mission with everything I create is I need to be passionate about it and not force myself to bring passion to it. I learned this a couple of years ago. I was feeling kind of like burnout with what I was doing, and I was unsure if what I was making was having any kind of impact on anything. Like, was anybody looking at it? Like, did it matter to anybody?
Quintessential struggle for everyone.
Yeah. And then, somebody will like tweet at me, hey, I watched the latest episode. This is so well done. And I'm like, I'm not ever asking for something like that. And then I'd have people like, oh, hey, I saw this for your school. I want to do it at my school, this documentary. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's really cool. And like that's 2 people. I don't have fan mail. I don't have droves of people knocking on my door to like tell me how awesome I am. Like that's not, you don't know what kind of impact you're going to have in what you do is basically what I'm saying. So when people are feeling down as filmmakers about what they're doing, just know that whether they think it or not, there's somebody that they're affecting, and they probably don't even know them once they see it. You might not ever meet them as well, but know that whatever you're doing has an impact and definitely has the potential to have an impact on somebody. If that's the reason you're in quote unquote the business, like I think that's a pretty good reason to be in it. And if something somebody makes has a negative impact on somebody or negative impact on a situation, then the person who makes it needs to understand that something negative has happened and try to understand and possibly correct that. I'm not saying that it's sole responsibility, but I think whatever we make as creators, as filmmakers, as podcasters, as news anchors, like whatever, like it doesn't matter if you're making something. If you're making something, you have a responsibility to own what you're doing. And a lot of people don't do that. Like they don't have a sense of ownership or a sense of pride or a sense of responsibility. It all goes hand in hand with what you're making. Just know that you're making something because you have an intention. You have to acknowledge both the positive and negative consequences of that action. And like I said before, you may not have to like change a whole lot if it's super positive, or if you end up offending the right people or with something you make. Like you just need to acknowledge that you had a hand in that you are responsible for what you make.
From Jaws, what do you think filmmakers can learn in order to make that kind of film that gives them that kind of impact and responsibility? What can we take away from like the film itself?
This comes from just a little bit of background knowledge I have on the film, not the film just at surface value. But Steven Spielberg, after this movie, said he would never film on the water again because he said it was such a pain in the butt, but he made it. And he didn't know what he didn't know. I obviously mean that you need to take some chances. Like you need to, if you don't know something, like try it. Like you need to make whatever you want to make and don't really think too much about how you're going to do it. Because sometimes that's the best way to learn something is by making a mistake. Now, the mistake that Spielberg said he made was filming on the water. He never wants to do it again, but he executed it, I thought, pretty well. He didn't know. He was 26 when he made Jaws. Like nobody knows what they're doing at 26. Like, and nobody knows what they're doing at 34 either, just to be clear. It's just these kind of lessons from making a film like this can be so valuable to filmmakers because it was such a stretch. It was a natural stretch for him to make this film. And in that uncomfortability, you grow both as a person and as an artist, I think.
There's that idea that you mentioned earlier that I think is really interesting. The idea of you alleviate the terror by understanding it, or by getting a better sense of it. Can you expand on this idea a little bit? We recorded an episode on the film Hereditary.
Oh God.
Which, yeah, right. Which I vowed I'd never see that film again, and yet I had to for this podcast, and I'm never going to see it for a third time is my new vow. But that conversation was a lot about how horror is not always about a boogeyman. Sometimes it's about the things that are very close to us and the experiences that we've all shared. I feel like it kind of ties into this idea a little bit because I think this idea of alleviating terror by understanding the terror works in terms of the genre. You know, what you said, you alleviate the terror of the shark by getting a bit of a better understanding of who the shark is and what the shark does. And then you also alleviate the terror of doing something crazy like filming out on the water by doing it, by like, you know, just jumping head first.
If I'm afraid or I think something's dumb or negative or whatever, like the best way for me to alter those feelings is to understand something more. And in this movie, the obvious example is the shark. The wild thing about watching this movie in a global pandemic is that you can replace the shark with COVID.
Yeah, I remember when I watched this film like right at around the time of the pandemic, and it was shockingly prescient, like ridiculously so.
Yeah, the bounty gets placed on a shark, and you have everybody in town, everybody from the mainland coming to this island to then go out into the water and fish with dynamite, shoot it with a shotgun. Like it's equated to using horse dewormers to try and treat your COVID. Like that's what it is. It's like these people don't understand what is actually happening. And so they take it upon themselves to figure out without enough knowledge how to go about fixing or solving the problem. There's a difference between not understanding something and not wanting to understanding something. But I'm not like differentiating between those two. I'm just saying in order to possibly be less afraid of something is to understand it. There are certain instances where the more we understand, the more scary something gets. But I feel like the fear of the unknown is probably, I mean, at least for me, it's the biggest fear that I have with things. Like, you know, even if it's like, where is my life? It could be existential on some level or something like that. That's my belief, is that if you try to understand something more, you become less afraid of that uncertainty, even if you find out exactly what it is. And it is terrifying. I think it's better to know what it is than not. And I think with filmmaking, I think you could apply to just making those films, like you said earlier. Like if you don't know what you're doing, who the hell cares? I tell students all the time whenever I teach, I said, don't be afraid to suck, because you're going to be bad. And that's okay, because everybody was bad at one point. But how do you get better? And that's that same thing of like them tackling something they don't know or don't understand. Then they do it and they learn it and they understand it. And then they go on to be better because they understand something and they're less afraid to take chances. And that's what their fear is when it comes to aspiring filmmakers. It's probably failure. I would say 85% is probably failure.
Were you ever like afraid of sharks at all? Was there ever that fear for you?
Yeah. And it came from my own doing. I decided to watch a bunch of Shark Week episodes and then go to the beach. And I was like, do I want to go swimming right now? I don't know. Like you watch stuff like shows like Air Jaws, where it's the South African sharks jumping out of the water and grabbing these seals, and they're like jumping like 10 feet in the air. It's crazy. And then they'll have shows on like shark preservation, and then at 9 p.m. and then at 10 p.m. it's Shark Attack File 17. And it's like, it's dumb programming. It's dumb programming half the time, but Discovery Channel, I love you. However, you got issues with Shark Week. You got issues with it. But yeah, it was just my own doing. Like I'm watching a show called Shark Attack Files and I'm at the beach. Like,
right.
Why would I do that? And also like the likelihood of still getting attacked by a shark is there's an absurd stat of more people are killed by vending machines falling over than are attacked by sharks each year.
And so through this fear, did Jaws help you to understand that fear?
Jaws didn't, because it's literally a movie about being terrified by a shark. But Jaws inspired me to then go learn more about sharks. Like it wasn't immediate. It just showed me like I mentioned earlier, I can use the same Jurassic Park example earlier. Like as you're a kid, you love dinosaurs. And even if you're not like love dinosaurs, this movie inspired a bunch of people to sign up to be paleontologists, you know? And I like to think Jaws had the same impact for a lot of people. Now, they didn't go on to be ichthyologists or anything like that, but they might go on to be more appreciative and more understanding and at least have a better sense of wonder about what's in the ocean.
I personally find that this film, there is an element of this film about sort of coming to understand the creature.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, that scene, you know, where all the boaters are going out and trying to, you know, fish out trying to destroy the shark or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You have to contrast that so fascinatingly with Quint. He obviously wants to kill the shark, but he probably understands that animal 10 times better than any of those other people do.
100%.
And I think that's why like his character is kind of fascinating and why his end is so tragic, because he does sort of have this love story, this like love-hate story with this creature, with the creature of the shark. And I think the reason why this movie works really well is that the shark is sort of less of a horror movie monster by the end and more of its own character, I think, by the end, who has his own strategies and motivations and and I love that the movie is always like, this is what the shark is doing, this is why he's doing all these things. It's not just like terror, you know, like there's a methodology behind everything.
I think it's more of a character in me because I literally am watching a movie. I think that's what it is. I think because I'm watching a movie and this is an early film as far as the world's understanding of this animal, it inherently becomes a monster. Like this is a monster movie. And you do that by targeting individuals as well. Like it's not a massacre. Like it's not blind. You're introduced to every one of the shark's victims. It's the same reason why you have like Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers. Like it's one entity hunting down another entity, and then we'll go for another entity. Like it's very personalized. You get to see the individuals involved in all of these killings, like one-on-one. And I think for the character of that shark, like he's very like, what's he gonna do? He's gonna eat and he's gonna swim. And that's about all, and make little shark babies, as Hooper says. And that's all you need to know about this particular monster. But for some reason, he's a little smarter. And that's what I think it makes it that much more terrifying, like as a character, is that yes, the shark does all these things, but he's actually smart. Like he'll turn around to go back to the guy that's swimming in the water. He's got multiple barrels attached to him, but he doesn't care. He's going to try and swim down as hard as he can to pop those up. And nobody thinks he can swim with all those barrels on him. Then he starts ramming the boat, like, and all of it is grounded in what the animal would actually do. But because we're introduced to the shark as doing something that's a little abnormal to what is actually happening. It makes it that much more terrifying, I think. And as a character, like, I don't find myself ever rooting for the shark, but I find myself appreciating what he's doing. I'm like, oh, this son of a gun. The one scene I think that differentiates this shark as being a monster as opposed to just like a shark that lives in the ocean is the scene where the guys try to fish off the pier with the roast.
Yes.
And
the holiday roast.
We better catch something. This is my wife's holiday roast. Don't worry about it. $3,000 buys an awful lot of roast.
the creepiest, and just I laugh because it's so terrifying whenever I watch it, is that first half of the dock just floating out, and then all of a sudden it just turns around. Like, that's so terrifying because you're like, why is that turning? Like, you think, why that thing's not turning around on its own? It's the shark that's coming for it. And then there's that element of that unknown, as you're like, is the shark going to get that guy? And he ultimately doesn't. It's a nice, fun scare because there's no death at the end of that scene. But it's just like this individual shark is more of this monster than what actually lies in the ocean. I've said earlier that this movie, going back to like the COVID topic, is like, this movie is actually kind of a perfect encapsulation of that. It's a perfect encapsulation of a lot of things about the real world. There are things that scare us, and there are people who almost accept just being scared by it and then determine that they don't understand it, they won't understand it, they don't want to understand it, and will then act on their basic urges. And then there are people that want to understand something a little bit more. Now, whether it's a global pandemic, whether it's an individual person, whether it's a concept, I feel like, not to get on an apple box with this thing, but I feel like this is a film that is a perfect opportunity to be viewed as something that can convey the importance of understanding something more. And I think that's it. I think that's all I got, man.
That is how we conquer our fear of the unknown. Through understanding what scares us, by learning and taking stock and making informed decisions. You wouldn't think a giant shark named Bruce would be the one to teach that to us, but hey, it taught Taylor, and now he takes that idea of understanding and channels it in a very different way into his wonderful podcast, the Film Nuts Podcast. I should know. I was on it. I got to gush all about one of my favorite films, Liar Liar. And trust me, that choice requires a lot of understanding, as we've been calling it. I'll link that episode in the show notes. Don't be shy, give it a listen, and follow Taylor's show, the Film Nuts Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Before we go, I would be remiss to not plug our incredible Discord community. We are a group of passionate, positive movie lovers who want nothing more than to just have a place to talk and watch movies together. In fact, just last week, Taylor joined us for a Jaws watch party as our guest of honor, and it was awesome. Some people who were with us got to see the film for the very first time. Nothing beats experiencing watching a film with someone for the first time. Let me tell you. The My Favorite Movie Is Discord community is completely free of charge and incredibly easy to join. You just click on the link in the show notes and follow Discord's simple instructions. Even if you've never used Discord before, if you've never even heard of Discord before now, it only takes minutes to join. And you're going to want to join us for our next watch parties, including but not limited to The Mummy and Children of Men, the latter of which we are covering on our show next time with senior video editor at BioWare and co-host of Beyond the Screenplay, Alex Calledos. And who knows, he may even make an appearance at the watch party. Join us for those events and more by clicking on the link in the show notes. We can't wait to see you there. My Favorite Movie Is a Larry Freed Presents production. The show is created by and is currently hosted and produced by me, Larry Freed, and this episode was edited by Fernando Queiroz. Our graphic designer is Monica Sarmiento, our motion graphics designer is Elton Greenfield, and our theme song, Now and Then, as well as all original music featured on this episode, was composed and performed by Matt Gorduke. A special thanks to Taylor for being an incredible guest and for being so generous with his time, and another special thanks to our patrons: Charles, Keith, Mo, Tony, Sean, Taylor, yes, this Taylor, and Daniel. You guys are the reason that this show keeps on chugging even after an extended hiatus, so thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been your host, Larry Freed. Thank you so much for listening to My Favorite Movie Is.